you warmly today at this session co-organized by UNDESA, ITU, International Telecommunications Union, AARP, and the Global Coalition on Aging. And we are focused today on the older entrepreneur's role in the shaping of the tech landscape. Let me invite first our colleague Amin Lamrabat from UNDESA to make opening remarks for us and set up the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished representative, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. So it's a real pleasure to join you today in this important event on how older entrepreneurs are helping shape the tech landscape. I would like first to thank the ITU, AARP, for organizing this event in partnership with the UNDESA. And I just want to give you an overview of the 2030 agenda, just to have an idea of our UN agenda for sustainable development. The agenda sets out a universal plan of action to achieve sustainable development. It calls for leaving no one behind and for ensuring that the sustainable development goals, the SDGs, are met for all segments of society, at all ages, but with a particular focus on the most vulnerable, including older persons. So older persons for us must be recognized as the active agent of societal development in order to achieve these SDGs. So UNDESA, this is the 2030 agenda. Sorry, I didn't see that it was working. So UNDESA, just to give you also an overview of what our department does, it's a vital interface between global policies and national action in the economic, social, and environmental pillars. So besides its mandate to eradicate poverty, it also promotes employment, decent work for all, and it advocates for reducing the gaps of social inequalities. For youth, we deal with youth, older persons, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and we also deal with issues like family and cooperatives. So we deal with many social groups. The UNDESA is the main vehicle for promoting the social dimension of this 2030 agenda and the SDGs. And to achieve this goal, we work closely with governments, the UN system, civil society, the private sector, academic institutions, and all of the stakeholders working on our issues. A major part of what we do involves supporting the formulation of policies and inclusive social development, frameworks that can help governments deliver commitments made at the global level. So at UNDESA, we work to advance the social inclusion and well-being of older persons. And just to mention, the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, we called it MIPA, it recognized the benefits that older persons can make to society. So it stated that older persons should have the opportunity to work for as long as they wish and are able to, and should have access to education and training programs. The empowerment of older persons and the promotion of their full participation are essential elements for active aging. So MIPA also supported the development of small and micro enterprises for older persons. Today, there are more than 700 million persons aged 65 years or over in the world. So the number of older persons is projected to double to 1.5 billion in 2050. This rise in older persons, along with declining birth rates, means that there will be more people over 60 than under the age of 15. So this is really a huge, data that we have to think about. And when we think about entrepreneurship and new technologies, especially, we think mostly about youth entrepreneurs. But for example, in the US, we have like Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, the founder of Facebook, and Elon Musk, for example, are well-known young entrepreneurs, but very few of us in the US know about other successful older entrepreneurs, such as like Sam Walton. They said he founded Walmart at age 44. Charles Flint, he founded IBM, for example, at age 61st. So entrepreneurship and new technologies, they offer many opportunities for older persons. Some studies even have concluded that thanks to the deep experience and knowledge and networks that older persons have, the enterprises they set up have a higher survival rate. So this is very important to keep in mind. Innovative policies need to take into account the aspiration of older persons, especially the ones wishing to start a business activity and learn about new technologies. We need a specific focus on older persons and employment, business setup and ICT especially, which both help to promote active aging. If I go to this slide, so we have older persons, they really should not be excluded from these opportunities to launch new enterprises and access digital technologies. As the proportion of the world's population in the older ages continues to increase, we will need to create a positive awareness of the benefits of entrepreneurship and technologies for older persons. We need to keep older persons active and engaged in society. We need to promote also the culture of mixed-age entrepreneurial teams, including young people, young entrepreneurs. So with collective efforts, UN agencies, policymakers, civil society, and other stakeholders can support setting a new agenda of active and healthy aging that supports older entrepreneurs and enhances the capabilities and the resilience of older persons. This will help achieve also the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda that I mentioned before. So everyone should live with dignity and respect. Join us also tomorrow as we celebrate the International Day of Older Persons, which is the official event tomorrow. The theme is the journey to age equality. So this is just to have an idea of the theme. And we all have a duty to champion their role as an active participants in society. So we hope that you join us tomorrow, and also tomorrow we are featuring the launch of our UNDESA's World Population Aging 2019 highlights. So this will present the latest estimates and projections at the world aging population. So let us work all together to build societies for all ages that support older entrepreneurs, and I look forward to your ideas to support older persons, and I wish you a very successful event. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amin. That's a great start for our discussion. You set up the stage. You highlighted the most important things. If I can just bring you a perspective of ITU. ITU is a special UN agency on information and communication technologies. And digital inclusion stays in our heart, in the heart of ITU work. And it means that we are ensuring that all people have equal opportunity to become empowered through ICTs and be a part of a digital society which benefits all people equally. The Digital Inclusion Program in ITU promotes ICT accessibility as a mean to empower all people, regardless their age, their gender, location, or ability. And this is through ICTs. Our work is guided by several principles, and one of this is a holistic approach to digital inclusion and the understanding of the process, and the fact that creation of inclusive tech sector is regardless the age, location, and ability, which are the barriers and impediments. Let me just point you out to one of the events and one of our efforts as ITU, because we are one of the leading agencies of the multi-stakeholder process, which is the World Summit of Information Society. And each year, WSIS, which is the largest, WSIS Forum, which is the largest gathering of ICTs for development community, is introducing new thematic tracks to be addressed and by this community, and touching upon the topics which are based on the interest of the different stakeholders. And it's created through the open consultation process and crowdsourced. So there are a couple of tracks last year, for instance, ICT and disabilities, ICT and youth, and there are 2 new tracks on 2020, which is the ICT and older persons. And we can expect a lot of very interesting sessions, workshops, and this is just to bring it to your radar that this event will be held in Geneva from 6th to 9th April, and you're most welcome and invited to attend, of course, and of course help us to build this incredibly important new track and new theme. Before turning to our panelists around the table, let me just bring a small, short housekeeping information. So our session is being webcast. And there's a social media live streaming at the UN YouTube through the @UN Web, also at Facebook and Twitter. And we warmly welcome you to co-promote, share, and help us to put this message through. So yes, without further ado, let me turn to the speakers today. And the first speaker will actually test technologies with us because he's joining us remotely from Washington. So we have Javier Miranda from the US Census Bureau. And Javier has also a PowerPoint presentation. Javier, are you with us? Can you hear us?
I am with you. Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Brilliant. Javier, let me turn then to you with the first question. Is youth a key to entrepreneurial success? And why are there such perceptions? Can you help us to answer that question? Thanks.
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation to join you. I'm sorry I cannot be there with you, but at least we can use technology to connect. Yeah, so let me first say really quickly, I work for the Census Bureau, the principal economist here, and for this work that I'm going to be talking about, we use confidential data. So I am actually required to tell you that all the views that I will express are my own, and they do not necessarily represent the views of the U.S. Census Bureau. So with that, I'll go ahead and answer your questions. So if we go to slide number 2, the straight answer is no. Youth is not key to entrepreneurial success. So from my work with Ben Jones at Northwestern, Pierre Azoulay at MIT, and Danny Kim at UPenn, we find that the most successful firms that grow to be the largest, are not typically started by young individuals, but rather by individuals that are in their middle age when they started the company. This is true whether we look specifically at high-tech startups or whether we look at mainstream startups. So this is true of all kinds of business, not just of high-tech business. It is also true across geographic areas. So it is true regardless of location, whether we're looking at Silicon Valley, Boston, New York, California, it doesn't matter. Now, this is not to say that there aren't extraordinary individuals that are very young that have created companies that have gone on to revolutionize whole industries. And while these cases are well publicized, as was mentioned in the introduction, this is actually not the norm. So this view that young people are especially capable of producing big ideas, creating big companies, bringing about radical innovations is very common, and it's long-standing. Einstein famously said, a person who has not made his great contribution to science before the age of 30 will never do so. And when we look at venture capital, there's a strongly held belief there that youth is also important. Of course, we, as mentioned earlier, we have important kind of individual cases, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Musk, Zuckerberg, all folks and kind of extremely young and successful entrepreneur in their 20s. And so it's not perhaps too surprising that Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, that's the best well-known startup incubator, has stated that the cutoff in investors' head is 32. After 32, they start to be a little skeptical. So this belief is very well ingrained, and it is reinforced by media behavior. If we go to slide number 3, if we look at awards given to most compelling startups and top entrepreneurs, typically we see those awards being given to fairly young kind of entrepreneurs in their late 20s or early 30s. But of course, these are it's media choosing offering these awards, and they're based on selected samples. So to your second question, why these views? If you go to slide number 4, well, young people sometimes are thought to have advantages, specifically in areas of knowledge where deductive reasoning is important, where conceptual kind of abstract thought is important. There is some evidence that young people have an advantage. They're also believed to have, and there is some evidence that they're capable of transformative thinking. Radical innovations tend to take place early in life, or when a scientist first encounters a new paradigm before they've made up contributed a body of work to that field. So there's evidence on that. And of course, young people have more energy, have more optimism, confidence. They have time. They're not burdened by other things. So definitely, young people have and seem to have certain advantages, but that's not the whole story.
Great, thanks, Javier. Javier, just to follow up then, what advantages are afforded for not so young entrepreneurs? And then what are the best age for the entrepreneurship success?
So like I said, young people have and appear to have some advantages, but of course, experience offers incredible advantages. And in fact, young entrepreneurs face substantial disadvantages vis-a-vis more experienced, older individuals. For example, young people may lack experience running companies, in the management of operations or the marketing and sales department. The knowledge that is accumulated when people are young is still very limited. So they may lack sector-specific knowledge. They may lack knowledge of regulatory constraints, all things that are key to identifying strategic opportunities. All things that are key and necessary for success. So there's quite a bit of work in the literature showing that indeed experience in the industry is important, previous entrepreneurial experience is important for success, having access to finance and networks is important. All things that are accumulated over time as we age. So what is the mean age of what is the age that we find to be the average age of entrepreneurs? If we turn to slide number 5, when we look at the universe of businesses and startups in the U.S., we find that the average age of the entrepreneur at the time of the founding of that startup is 42. Now, earlier we talked about high-tech entrepreneurs, and of course, a lot of these businesses in this universe that we've been looking at are encompassed by restaurants, retail stores, nail salons, things that are not kind of what we have in mind necessarily when we think about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ventures. So what happens when we look at high-tech? If we go to slide number 6, we defined, here we select businesses based on their growth orientation, if they are in a high-tech industry or whether they're backed by VC or they own patents. And what you can see is that if anything, founders get a little bit older than the average business startup. So anywhere between 42 and 44 years of age is what we see in the U.S. Now, it might be that some of these, the younger entrepreneurs, the successful entrepreneurs, are in specific geographic areas. With our data, we've been able to look at that. If you look at slide number 7, you can see that even in areas specific and as small as Silicon Valley, the average age of the startup founder is around the age of 40. depending on how you define it, anywhere between 40 and 45. And we can go even further and say, okay, well, maybe it is that the most successful firms are the ones that are founded by young entrepreneurs. But even then, if you go to slide number 8, you see that if we look at the most successful firms, the 1 in 1,000, the top 0.1% of firms, again, you see that these businesses, these most successful businesses, are founded by people that are in their middle age. So I'll just stop and just give you 2 more thoughts. If we go to slide number 10, of course, there is a wide distribution of founder age. If you look at the blue line in this chart, that gives you the full distribution by age of entrepreneurs in the U.S. And you can see that most entrepreneurs, kind of it's single model, and the distribution peaks around the age of 40. So most entrepreneurs are middle age. One important thing to note is that given that it's perfectly reasonable to assume that given that this is where most businesses are started, that it is also reasonable to find that most successful businesses are also funded by individuals in their middle age. But even conditioning on how many businesses are started by individuals in different age buckets. So even when we condition on that and we look at what are the probability of success at a given age, given that you've started a business, and what slide number 11 tells you is that even when we control for that, the most successful businesses are founded by folks well into their middle age. And we in fact find that a founder at age 50 is twice as likely to experience a successful business compared to a founder at age 30. So age seems to an experience seems to afford individuals a leg up when it comes to building a successful business. And I'll stop there.
This is great. Thank you so much, Javier, and thanks for actually showing us the evidence-based presentation of the age distribution and the advantage of experience, right, over the youth. Well, let me turn maybe to Nigel Smith from AARP. Yes, this is Nigel, your clicker. And Nigel, first thing, what is the biggest myth that you would like to expose when it comes to the older entrepreneurs in tech?
That you don't have to be a techie in order to be successful in technology. Let me first share a few thoughts. So I'm with AARP, I think one of the coolest organizations in the entire world. I'm very biased. We're a nonprofit. Our goal is to empower everyone in society to choose how we live as we age. We have 38 million members, and we deliver on our mission through information advocacy and service. And what I really want to hone in on is build upon a little bit of what was shared earlier today. We're in the midst of this amazing aging revolution that's taking place. So we heard a little bit of the global stats that's happening. I'll build a little bit up on that because I think it's real important, and it gets to the question that you asked. In the US, 10,000 people are turning 65 every single day. It's a stat that started back in 2011. It's going to continue for another 11 years. Fastest growing age demographic, people over 85, second fastest people over 100. I have 2 beautiful daughters at home. Zuri is 11, Rena is 7. They're both projected to be centenarians. In fact, if you're 10 years old, you have a 1 in 2 chance of living till 104. So we are living in an age of longevity, and that's a beautiful thing. And with the longevity comes a whole bunch of opportunities and challenges. So AARP, we sized the opportunity. We call it the longevity economy, $7.6 trillion generated by people over 50 in economic activity every single year. If you're an innovator, you're an entrepreneur, you ignore this market at your peril. But there are some massive challenges, and this is what I really want folks to hone in on, right? From a health perspective, and I can't get into all of this in 5 minutes, but the things that keep me up at night: cardiovascular disease. This is responsible for 1 in 3 deaths in the United States every single year. 66 million people over the age of 40 have cardiovascular disease. People aren't eating right, they aren't exercising enough, they aren't getting enough sleep, they aren't managing their stress levels. 43% of American households are projected to run out of their savings heading into retirement. Think about what that means for financial resiliency. People aren't saving enough money. Average savings is $2,500. 1/3 of Americans are yet to save any money for retirement. And then when there's this whole notion of social isolation, lack of connections to friends, family, community, the impact on your physical, mental, emotional health is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Roughly 20% of Americans over 65 are socially isolated. These are the challenges that society should be very concerned about. And so going back to your question about tech is an enabler, right? So AI, robotics, VR, those are potential avenues to addressing these massive problems. The thing is, the status quo solutions today aren't doing enough. So the promise of these disruptive AI technologies is that they could potentially be a way of solving these problems. So when it comes to older entrepreneurs and technology, the thing is really understanding that, okay, these are the challenges. Can these technologies be a way, be a source, be a potential pathway? So you kind of look at these as enablers. You need to understand what the tech can do. But gosh, you can hire a college student, you can hire someone to basically fill that role of building the technology. But as long as you understand the business modeling, creating solutions, these other skill sets are what's really critical. What I've seen as a potential path that's been working are co-founders. I've seen older entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs are like, okay, let's do this together. Let's figure out what skill sets we can match with each other. In some cases, the older entrepreneurs are the techies, and the young entrepreneurs serve the face of the company because of the bias that exists in society. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important that society gets off of its laurels and look beyond bias, look beyond. To me, it doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or 95 years old, whether you're black or white, whether you're female or male. These are the challenges we need to solve for, and we need to get to the actual solutions themselves. Mm-hmm.
So then, to follow up on this, what are the success factors for those who are the entrepreneurs of young and older entrepreneurs in your programs, in the work that you do in AARP?
So there are multiple success factors. I think the biggest one is having an ambidextrous mindset, right? It's the left and right brain. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do within Hatchery Ventures. Mm-hmm. So it's very simple. I find the best startups in the entire world. We go through amazing accelerators like Mass Challenge, Health Tech Mass Challenge, FinTech, Upward Labs. We do pitch contests around the country. Now, it's really important because when we go to these accelerator programs and pitch contests, it's open access. We need to make sure that they're opening the doors to just about as many people as possible. Again, it's important that everyone has a chance to get to the table, right? But we get the best possible startups in the entire world to put their hat in the ring. We select the best possible startups, we bring them on board, and then there's a process of learning. And this is kind of where the learning mindset comes in. So you may have been running and racing for a while, but you have to be able to stop and pause and be open to okay, let's stop and listen to what consumers are saying. So the general goal that we have is, think about the suitcases that you roll around in the airport, where if you're 5 years old or 95 years old, anyone can use it. That's the gold standard. It's the idea of an ageless consumer universal design. We want to make sure if you have a VR headset that anyone can use it, right? So as we develop these disruptive technologies, we want as many people as possible to have access. So we work on shaping these solutions for an ageless consumer. We think about as many use cases as possible. You're going to hear from Rachel very soon. I have so many plans for Rachel, and she has no idea. But it's really, what are all the different ways? Again, we see all the challenges before. So what are all the different paths that we can take these solutions and build, and so that again, there are so many challenges out there. So it's how can these disruptive technologies apply? And then we think about the very smart strategic pathways for scale, because ultimately what we do for all, and we want to make sure that these disruptive technologies impact as many people as possible. What I want to just finally just share is images, right? These are some of the startups that we work with. Now, we heard from Mr. Miranda about, that they may actually have an advantage over the younger cohorts. What I would share is this, right? They are doing the same disruptive technologies, addressing the same big challenges. And yes, they have one thing that the others don't have, which is a few additional years of experience. And that kind of shows up in a couple of ways. One is, if you're doing something over and over again, that executional experience is real important. So that guy in the bottom right, Chris Wong, he has a great platform today called LifeSite. Well, before this, guess what he did? He launched PeopleSoft, right? So of course he's going to bring his experience launching PeopleSoft to his current endeavor, which he's doing right now with his daughter, which is really cool. They also have like the softer skill sets, right? The emotional intelligence, the judgment, these things that show up very subtly, when you're in meetings, especially in corporate settings, that brings like greater degrees of confidence when you're engaging. So they do have, I think, a little bit of an advantage over their younger cohorts. The last thing I would say is that it's really powerful to see their generosity of spirit. In sessions where, in environments where they are with younger entrepreneurs, they want to coach, to mentor, to be the social butterflies. They want to give so much and make sure that their younger cohorts don't go down the same traps that they did. And it is such a powerful thing to behold. So I'm gonna end there. And again, the messages for me is really powerful. The challenges of society are too big, way too big for us to be caught up on biases. And older entrepreneurs can crush it as good as or better than younger entrepreneurs with hoodies. So let's do it.
Nigel, this is extremely inspirational, and we share your passion, and definitely we could talk till a couple of days further, but I think we called Rachel, right? Rachel, you've been called, so... Yes, we have your clicker. Rachel, you started your startup in your 40s, right? You've been the creative spirit and mind behind. Would that be any different if you started in your 20s?
Yeah.
How can you share with us your experience? Thanks.
Sure. I mean, I think that the first way is a lot of the things that people have mentioned in the past, just the amount of experience, the people that you get to work with, the times that you failed and had to fix, and all of those sorts of things. I think for me personally, I went back to school and I got a master's degree in future studies, and that really enabled me to look at things with a much more long-term view. So, within that spirit, I want to thank everybody, first of all, for having me here. It's a real honor and privilege to be here. And I would like to start it out with sort of, even though the premise of this study reflects well on me, which is great, I question some of the measures, and not that, and that it's not that they're bad measures, but just that additional measures might need to be taken, because this study in particular looked at pure growth, whether that is in financial or whether that is in sort of employee growth means. And we're in a world right now, I mean, the SDGs themselves very rarely mention economic, like a pure economic, growth. And so for me, I think the real difference between starting my company in my 20s and starting my company now is that having had that experience of future studies and learning about how you can create preferable futures, that I was able to create a company that is actually much more in line with the SDG goals, while at the same time being able to sort of appease the traditional Silicon Valley. You have to make profit, you have to be able to compete on those same levels, but that you are able to have multiple bottom lines and multiple positive outcomes. So with that, what I would like to do is really just show you what we do first, and then maybe explain how we can, as much time as I have, explain how we make that happen. So we are going to, and the thing is this next thing is a video, so let's see if it goes. And we're going to need sound for this. And Olivia, she was a professional singer, but she had not sung for 10 years due to dementia. She couldn't see the lyrics, she couldn't remember them. And what you're going to listen here for is our lyric coaching software.
Old winter song. Old winter song. But I miss you most of all. But I miss you most of all. My darling. My darling. When autumn leaves. When autumn leaves. Start to fall. Start to fall.
So this is her just her second session.
It's awfully hard to tell somebody what I experienced.
Yes.
Because it was like a miracle.
And so the miracle that you're saying you experienced was what?
My voice returned.
Finally mountain.
Sing with me, sing.
Thank you very much. And so that can seem like magic, or that Olivia just kind of had this amazing moment, but the fact of the matter is what neurologists and medicine is finding now is that singing on a regular basis, prescribed singing, has a ton of different kinds of therapeutic interventions, everything from having a full brain workout to increasing all of those neurochemicals, serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, that we're shoving into antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs that we know we're trying to level all across, all across the world. It has potential for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It strengthens immunity, and most of all, maybe from the point of view of the UN, is oxytocin, which is released when you sing. It bonds people together, and that's really, I think, what the UN is all about. So more singing at the UN, as far as I'm concerned. But the most famous case of this is Gabrielle Giffords, the congresswoman here who was shot. Left hemisphere brain trauma typically wipes out your ability to speak. Her music therapist worked one-on-one with her, playing her music, feeding her the words of the song, just like you heard before with Olivia, and eventually brain plasticity takes over and you're able to actually rewire where speech takes place, right? The problem is only 7,000 music therapists in the country, so not everybody in the US alone, so everybody's not getting access to this, right? And so this is really the problem. And when you look at those SDG goals, the real goal is, how can we get this to more people? How can we get healthcare, better healthcare to more people? So what we did is we digitized, we used technology, that's really my background, including working in future studies, and we essentially digitized what music therapists do. We create care plans for different kinds of conditions. Right now we're focused on dementia, but also looking at chronic breathing disorders. And then one of my favorite things about it is that we create online training. And what this means is that hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people really, who aren't musicians, don't know how to do music therapy, whether or not they are professional caregivers or whether they're, as Hazel Henderson, who's an economist who spoke in these halls many times, has said, is love economy caregivers. Anybody who's had a family member with dementia knows how few tools there are out there. So in this way, we're able to expand and get greater care to get a greater number of people, like the SDGs. We're now at 450 senior living communities around the country, and again, one of the ways that I think that this fits into the SDG goals is we did a study with our facilitators, and 92% of them said that facilitating SingFit makes their job more fulfilling. These are people who work some of the most difficult jobs, caring for people with dementia. So the day that came back out, we were really proud, and I think that the SDG goal of people not just finding work, but finding fulfilling work is really important. And I think that, this is another way that we sort of fit into that. These are some of our end user benefits. I won't go over these as much with you, but in those 450 communities, we see mood elevation, we see a return to speech of people who have not spoken before, and this fits into people in their older age really living their best life into their older age. We've seen a reduction in anti-anxiety medication usage. And this is a couple more slides just to say that we have a new platform coming out that I'm excited about, because I think it does fit into that work SDG, where our new platform will allow SingFit to take place in groups. It can take place one-on-one. It can take place on its own. But I sort of have this vision of, when I got into senior living, I thought, hey, I've been working in startups since I'm 20 years old, if not longer, and I really thought, give me a hammock, give me a beer and I'm retired. But what you find when you work in senior living is that it's purpose. So to be able to have a volunteer work with somebody one-on-one who has dementia, right? Finding purpose in work, even if it's not necessarily even paid work, I think is really important. This is my final slide. The thing about Silicon Valley and the thing about large growth is people like big numbers. So one of our big numbers right now is our SingFit, our first product, which is the SingFit Prime, which is in the senior living communities. Over 1.6 million times a year does somebody with dementia interact and get benefit from our product. And we're really looking for that by 2024 to get up to more than 400 million a year. And that's our big goal. And I'm just so very excited and thankful to be here at the UN to help move that goal, not just our company, but music is medicine, into the fore and make it as commonplace in healthcare as pharmaceuticals are.
Rachel, this is extremely inspirational. Thank you so much for this. I think we have some round of applause. One following question. You have this extremely interesting and specific experience, right, with music and technology for older people and used by older people as well to get the training to be more fulfilled in their job. What would be your recommendation, if any, for the governments, for instance, right, that they can, perhaps you would like to share and formulate that they can, include older persons in tech entrepreneurship?
Well, I mean, I agree with a lot. I think Nigel covered a lot of that, in that the intergenerational aspect of technology creation, I think, is really important. And I think it's important all across the board. If you look at senior living communities, if they have nursery schools in the senior living communities, everybody's happier, everybody's healthier. And so I think that you can do that in technology as well and have that back and forth. I also think I sometimes speak for an organization called Teach the Future. And what Teach the Future, which was founded by Dr. Peter Bishop, really does is he inserts the idea of long-term planning, like the SDG goals, into both elementary, middle school, high school, and college learning, so that more people can think like this and really understand how. I think a lot of times, and this is a little bit of a mass generalization, and I do not like to do that at the UN, but I think sometimes when you're younger, I know certainly a lot of the ideas I came up with when I was younger was because they were cool. And you didn't necessarily look at, what are the ramifications? I worked at a pre-YouTube company, and sometimes I go, did I do the right thing? Is user generated, you know what I mean? But you really need to look at what are these long-term things. And then I would say that the third thing is really what you guys are doing here is representation. And I don't think that just means representation for older people. I think that means representation for younger people, people of color, people who aren't typically in these things, how do you get them involved more in tech? And that would be, I think Brazil at one point did a really wonderful job with that, set up tech centers all over the place for seniors and for young people, and now they have a great tech industry.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thanks. This digital inclusion aspect is definitely something that we can further promote in our work with governments. Let me maybe turn right now to Richard Robinson from AARP. And Richard, we would like to hear, what is your definition of the differences between young entrepreneurs and the older entrepreneurs?
Well, I can sum it up in one sentence. I would say that younger entrepreneurs ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And I can give you a couple of examples here. Back in the mid-'90s, this is me working for a company called Digital City, which was a startup bought by AOL. And at the time, yes, we moved fast and we broke a lot of things. Fast forward many years, and there I am again. And you can see a number of people around this table in their 40s and 50s. This is a startup that I started with these guys several years ago. And when we went to talk to VCs, we kind of got this sort of response. Are you serious right now? In other words, it was tinged with a little bit of ageism. So they were accustomed to seeing startup founders in their 20s coming and making pitches about growth companies. And when they saw us with a real business plan, it was sort of cognitive dissonance. And we continued on, and still, we still received these sorts of responses. Eventually, however, several years later, we were one of the fastest growing companies in the country. So it demonstrates that founders of a certain age, shall we say, can be very successful in a short amount of time. Based on the experiences they have. And I'm very fortunate to be able to kind of take that experience and put that into AARP's innovation labs, where we develop original products in the safety, as I say, of a large company. We deploy human-centered design to go about creating original new products. And I have the good fortune of working with entrepreneurs, as we call them, a couple on my team here, who are people who have had companies in the past and are experienced in entrepreneurship. And what we do is we bring in people who are potential consumers for products we want to build, and we spend a lot of time individually deep diving with each of them to understand what are the problems that they're facing, what are the problems we think they're facing, and instead work with them to find out if our hypothesis is correct or not. This involves group sessions, deep one-on-ones, focus groups. And then, of course, at the end, we want our potential consumers to actually interact with our products. In this case, a VR product that we built. Sometimes that might mean feedback is not necessarily positive, and we go back and iteratively we develop the product. But it's important that we have our customers or potential customers as part of the whole process along the way, including at the end. Some of the products that we built include a VR product we call Alcove, which is all about getting families, cross-generational families, involved in VR. Something called Let's Be Well, which is targeted at folks who have suddenly discovered they have a chronic condition. And out of the box comes a number of solutions, in this case, diabetes. We have a product called Confetti, which captures moments that matter. It's a photo-based product. And again, it's cross-generational. It's meant for young people to use with their grandparents or their parents. Vested In is a product that startups can use to find 401k plans for their employees. And then we're looking at a lot of new concepts, including those that involve categories that maybe haven't been touched on in the past, like relationships over 50 and over 60. These are really important for a lot of reasons, not only for personal reasons, but also for health. Isolationism is a huge contributor, as Nigel pointed out, to all kinds of health issues. So we think we've got a number of product ideas that target relationships among people over 50 and on up to, as old as you can count. There are a number of life changes that people go through after 50 that generally people don't talk about, or they talk about maybe in hushed tones. These are things we want to bring out into the open and address them with products and services. And then everyone faces crisis in their life, whether it's a loss of a loved one or some other kind of crisis. And today there aren't really services that address that sort of thing. And we know people, when they have a crisis like that, suddenly their whole world is turned upside down. So we're looking at ways, particularly for people in the 50s and 60s, but really cross-generationally, a product and a service that would be able to address these sort of crises that come up in people's lives. So those are some of the new products that we're focused on developing in the next year or so in the lab.
Thanks, Richard. But when you see your experience and such a multiple myriad of the products, we think about how to fund them, right? So what is the advantage for the venture capitalists when they are looking at the team of more mature entrepreneurs and founders? So
I think the obvious one is experience. With experience comes the ability to not make the mistakes that you would make as a younger person, which saves you time and saves the VCs money. It also, I think, generally VCs have more confidence once they get past the picture that I showed you, that they are able to understand that, oh wait, yes, people who are over 50 can actually move fast and develop things quickly and successfully. And typically you'll find entrepreneurs who are, say, over 50 are thinking more about the business model, the business case, and what is a product that can actually survive versus let's just try to grow something really quickly. And that's something that's music to VC's ears, especially now. Entrepreneurs today who are over 50 had lived through the dot-com bubble in 2000 and realized that you got to focus on a product that has a business plan. So I think that's probably a couple of good ones there to note.
That's a great list already. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Let me turn to Melissa from the Global Coalition on Aging. Melissa, can you tell us what are some of the myths around older workforce and why they are wrong? If you can help us to address this.
Sure, absolutely. I think the important thing that we've hit on so many of these points, I'm going to reiterate a little bit just for emphasis, and I think it's good. There's some main messages I want people to go home with, and I think, Rich, what you guys are doing is incredible, Nigel at AARP, but seeing these photos of older people actually in the process of that product development is really important. And I think that's a challenge has been that, older people in the younger people in the startup space are thinking they know what older people need. And that's really a critical issue. It's a problem. It's ageist in itself. And so congratulations on that work. And thank you, Anna, and thank you to UNDESA for hosting this forum, which I think is really critical looking at this week as we celebrate the International Day of Older Persons. What we do at the Global Coalition on Aging is we're really focusing on what those opportunities are for the sheer fact that we're living longer. And that's a great opportunity. It's a great gift. And so overall, we're trying to change that mindset that being older is not a good thing or being older is a burden on society. And so we work with global corporations and we work with great organizations, from global institutions to academics, to NGOs to really help reshape that. So one of the big issues that we are looking at is this concept of older workers, right? Because if you're a large corporation, if you are a government, you need to know these numbers. You need to know in the United States, that's $15 trillion in spending power. You need to know by mid-century, there are going to be 2 billion people over the age of 60. This is a huge market, regardless of what business you're in, regardless of what jobs that you do. And so we're helping to build strategies around what do those different products and services need to look like? What strategies do we build around that? What strategies do we build around a workforce that we know is skewing older, but we also know there are 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. So how do we make sure we get the benefits of all of those different generations? And how do we use this as a platform for understanding diversity and corporate social responsibility strategies as well? So as we're looking at this issue, I'm going to sort of take it to a different level when we're thinking about workers generally, and I think this definitely translates to startups as well, because we need to change our mindsets. We need to change the concept of what being older is, like I said, and really celebrate it, and that takes all of society with different folks around the table, really leading that conversation. So when you think about myths,
just like one way of how exactly like we can combat the ageism in the workplaces, what practically we can do.
Absolutely. I think we need to break down some of these myths, right? We talked about productivity. We've worked with different economists around the world, and there's a particular study by Axel Borsuppan, some of you guys may know, from the Max Planck Institute in Munich. He actually went in for 4 years into an automotive company, and she checked on how was the productivity going at different ages. And up until the age 65, that productivity was increasing. And exactly what everyone is saying here, it's because of that experience. That experience is so important. So while older workers might be a little bit slower, they are not making those big mistakes that take a lot of time to recoup. So we need to understand that older workers are just as productive, if not more productive, because some studies show that peak is actually around the age of 55. And then we also need to combat that myth that older workers mean that people aren't healthier as they age. Over the 20th century, we've had great innovations in sanitation and in development and medical and in technology and in healthcare that have given us this longevity. And so it's a precious thing, and we are living healthier as we live longer today. So we need to combat the myth that older workers just mean a higher healthcare cost, but in fact, if you look at how people report their health is as they age, you'll see between 60 and 80% of people over the age of 65 reporting that they're in good health or in excellent health. And so that means they still have a lot more to give society. And so I think that plays into sort of the third myth that we've talked about a little bit today too, is we assume that as people age, it's like we got to retire at 65. Well, that'd be awesome if you don't like what you're doing. But if we find our passions and we're able to do work that is meaningful to us, we can continue to work. And I saw the stat, Nigel, in your slides, 3/4 of people who are at or approaching retirement age want to work longer. So in many cases, they need to work longer, but in many cases, they want to work longer. And there's plenty of data also that shows that as you work, that actually improves your health, both from a mental point of view and from a physical point of view. So I think it's really important that we begin to take some of those steps to integrate that into our conversations and as employers to take action in these areas.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Picking up on yours, very important points. Minta, what would be exactly the way that the older entrepreneurs are more successful than the younger ones? If you can help us with this answer.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Can someone give
yes,
me a clicker?
the clicker, magic clicker, please.
Okay. So I'm Minda Guhab. I'm Chief People Officer and co-founder of Vitality Health. Vitality Health is a social app for co-caring. And the concept of co-caring acknowledges that we are all caregivers and care receivers. And through this concept of co-caring, that Vitality can build a culture and a community that really takes care of one another. Now, who better to take care of the world but the mothers, the fathers, the grandfathers of the world, as well as the young? It really takes all of us. I'm really grateful for my co-founders and I, who are Gen X, Boom Xers, and Millennial. Here's a quick shot of us. My co-founders and team of 30 are committed to creating a world that is connected, well cared for, and vital. And together we are launching a community that provides robust physical and emotional support for people with health challenges, such as caregivers, elderly, disabled, and all patients. By building personalized networks of caring, personalized networks of caring for us and customized information that often takes days, weeks, months to find. Vitality Health is entirely bootstrapped. We've been doing this for a year and a half without any outside funding. I am the founder who originated this idea and built it from scratch over the past 5 years. I am a 45-year-old Filipina American woman. Now, I looked at the wonderful SDG Sustainable Development Goals, and what it takes, I believe, especially for my favorite SDGs, no hunger, zero poverty, good health and well-being, and partnership for goals. That takes building an incredible community, and again, it takes all of us. And we have all heard wisdom from the young and folly from elders, especially this past week. You will not find successful entrepreneurs or leaders by demographic, just as you won't find people who really care by demographic. To find people who will forcefully move forward the goals that we all want together, it's a couple things. First is perspective. Second is integrity. And then third is the ability to build community. So what do I mean by perspective? It's the ability to generate or create things from nothing, from your imagination and your ability to communicate. And the mature have that in spades. We have been in an ocean of needs and seen all the help and resources that are there through our lives. So we are really well positioned to have really powerful perspective. And then what you have to add to that is in personal integrity. And what I mean by that is not a moral right or a moral wrong way of seeing things, but more like structural integrity, the ability to build a foundation. And for us, for people who are building great companies, great movements, who want to build world change, what personal integrity really is about keeping our word and doing what we promise. It's also that when there are negative consequences from our word or from not keeping our word, we make up for it. It's that simple. I really think that's how you find those people. You listen to their story, you see what they do. And again, we come back to the ability to build community. And to build community, you absolutely need all of those things. I have spent my entire career bringing communities together through tech. It's something I've experimented with. Rachel, I can see the same thing for you too. I'm from the Gen X generation. We are the forgotten generation, but we created Google. You guys need to be looking at us. We came of age during tech, and we know how to use both tech and human skills. I think if we listen to a Gen Xer like myself saying, we are bringing communities together with technology in a humanizing, not a dehumanizing way, in a humanizing way, we are people you can believe because we've lived it. Again, here we are critically thinking about policy that is ignoring an entire generation that can create and build with strength and experience these communities that can move forward the world. I'm really grateful for that. I think if we can bring together people, all generations, who need some guidance on how to talk to human beings, right? Not just through tech, and the other way around, bring a whole generation of people to know how to talk through tech and reach out to a huge community of people they didn't know they could reach. We could really make some amazing things happen, right? Our varied experiences as mature people allows us to build large, robustly positive and curated communities. And that's what we're doing with Vitality Health. We're bringing an ocean of needs with the ocean of help and resources that are out there. And tech is just another channel of communication within the infrastructure of a larger business.
Exactly. So Minda, particularly for the tech-driven businesses, right? can mature entrepreneurs have advantage? And if yes, if you can name them practically.
Enthusiastic, yes. Yes. I moved to Silicon Valley from New York City because I needed tech wisdom. The tech elders are in Silicon Valley. And it's those folks, especially the ones who have built businesses and know how to turn their passion into the material, into products, into companies, into communities. Those are the folks who teach us, and they do it. They're still doing it. I believe, again, there is an incredible resource being ignored in passing by the mature tech entrepreneurs, and they are there in spades. I've heard about the wonderful elderly designer over at IDEO who comes up with amazing ideas. Ever since I met her, I've met a million of them everywhere, but they're afraid. They feel like they're not really supposed to be. Let's bring them out. Like I said, I have this whole group, and we're whole integrated. It's going to take the 3 generations with our different types of wisdom working together. And our communities that we've built together, again, that takes many years. We've got, all 3 of us, got hospital, academic, corporate alliances, even hugely influential art and artistic, spiritual, athletic communities. These are all things that we can work with right away, right now. We have already those communications channels set up and harness it powerfully through tech. So if you can combine new tech and mature human wisdom, we can move the world and make the SDGs that the UN has put forth that everyone wants, we make it happen much faster than you would have imagined.
That's a great line to summarize, right, the entire advantage of mature and entrepreneurs. Jamil, you don't have an easy job because in the very fast way, we need to address 2 things which are very interesting. And from your aspect, we know that you have a lot of appreciation for older persons in terms of the software development. Can you tell us why is that?
Yeah, sure. So we do a lot with artificial intelligence, blockchain, and machine learning. We are advisors, we educate, we have classes and courses that we deliver. And so we meet a lot of people. Last year, I think we held around 30 or 40 different events around these topics in New York City, DC, and Boston. We work with a lot of the people in the government, in the Capitol, related to this. And so we get this surface area. We meet a ton of people, all kinds of different demographics. And what we find is, number one, generally a lot of people have a misunderstanding around disruption. They feel like disruption is going to displace them or disenfranchise them. And what we find is actually disruption allows for more inclusion. It allows the opportunity for somebody who has been disenfranchised or has not been included an entry point into this new disruption, because nobody understands that disruption, and everybody's starting from ground zero in terms of learning about that disruption. So some of the messages that we give, and I teach also at Columbia. I'm a graduate professor at Columbia Business School, NYU, and CUNY, and I teach blockchain AI there. And I've got a mix of students. Many of them are over 50. They're in their 60s. And obviously a lot of them are in their early 30s. And so the message I give to them is that these disruptive things that are coming, AI and blockchain, and even if a simple programming language like Python that is now taking up getting a lot of presence in data analytics, is an entry point for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't have that experience, and it's a way to get into that space. And the other observation that we have is when it comes to ideas are cheap. There are tons of ideas in the market. Lots of people have ideas. We get tons and tons of ideas coming to us from all kinds of people. It's almost difficult to listen to these ideas often because there are just so many of them. The challenge then becomes how do you execute and how do you drive adoption for these ideas? And that typically, when we need help with that, we go to people that are a little bit more seasoned, that have a little bit more experience, that know how to take an idea and couch it with all the right types of services and components that are needed to get the idea into the market and become successful. So that's how we see that fact that regardless what age, the experience is critical.
Sure. And then you were mentioning AI space, right? So
Yes.
why is that you're so optimistic about the impact and the future of the older entrepreneurs in the AI?
Yeah, so I'm looking at it from a macroeconomic point of view. And Melissa and I were talking earlier about how AI and healthcare and all these kinds of things, and I think those are microeconomic benefits. From a macroeconomic point of view, AI will erode jobs on the entry-level side. So where decision-making is fairly clear, you can create a decision tree. So this be a ledger entry in this thing or that account. It's very binary or a very clear decision-making. Those type of jobs that are typically entry-level jobs are going to erode and disappear, which is going to put pressure on those that are emerging into the job market to increase their skill level to even get a job. So that entry-level job, that level of aptitude is going to increase, and for them to able to increase their aptitude, they're going to rely on people that have a little bit more experience. They're going to have to go to the other side of the tail of that curve and pull in. And for the people that are on the on that side of let's say above 30 or above 40 that have that experience, they're going to find that a lot of the things that they are good with will start to come back into demand because AI is going to erode the left side of that tail.
Extremely interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think we had such a wealth of information and insights, and I think right now we are running a little bit out of time, but I think we can accommodate 3 questions. So if there are any reactions on the floor, please go ahead. We are having Q&A right now, and I'm sure you have some pertinent questions to ask, and then we will run through the panel to address all of them. Any questions? Gary, please.
Thank you very much, Anna. I would like to hear what some of you, all of you might have to say about the fact that I think the ageism and the challenges here are baked into the system in some ways. I'll use the UN, for example. I left the tech industry in 2000 to join the UN and then was faced with a mandatory retirement which I really wasn't ready for, and I'm still happy to have the options that I do. But this wasn't just mandatory retirement. What happens once you're 60 or 62 in the UN's case, or 65 now, is that there is a bias. You're not looked at as potential for other jobs or there's no post sort of development. I just want to know what you guys think about the idea of mandatory retirement and how we can bridge that gap that exists there, either formally, as it does here at the UN, very formally, or informally in most industries, and especially in the tech industry. Having come from that background where I was the oldest guy in the room and when I was in my 40s, then went to the UN and found myself, hey, I was one of the younger people. But anyway, what do you think?
Great, thank you, Gary. Anyone else? Question, reaction, remark that we can address in the last turn right now? No? So I'm looking for the volunteers. I saw you, Jamal. Go ahead,
sure.
please.
A couple of points. I don't know about mandatory. I don't have a comment on that, but I do have a comment on a systemic problem in the U.S. and probably globally. Is that entrepreneurship is almost a cult, right? It's a cultish thing, and it needs to become mainstream. Personally, and I learned this the hard way. I was in tech and I was in banking. I used to work for Lehman Brothers, JP, and I learned it the hard way but my nature is to be entrepreneurial. I think the human nature is to be entrepreneurial, effectively to be your own boss, and to find and build value around yourself and brand yourself, and then build something for yourself that you can sustain, and then therefore the concept of retirement doesn't exist. You just keep on working and building, and then maybe you have people working for you when you don't want to work. So I think I agree with you that it is a systemic thing, and that we're trying to change some of that, whatever we can try to change that, and then the entrepreneurship needs to become a mainstream thing. Right now it's cultish, or maybe it's considered too risky. I talk to a lot of people that don't want to leave their jobs. They're kind of in this Pavlov thing where they, that ding of that every 2 weeks there's a direct deposit. They can't let that go, but they're actually eroding a lot of their value by staying in their jobs. I'm not a big believer in careers. I believe in that somebody can build. If you're valuable to an organization, then you're valuable in the market, and you can leverage that independently.
Thanks, Jamil. Rachel?
So in future studies, when you study that, there's a and I can't answer your question directly about the UN because I just don't know enough about it, but in terms of older entrepreneurs and how we can sort of even out some of this bias, there's a study in Future Studies called Images of the Future, right? And I think we all know what this is instinctively, which is that sort of the things that we see in media are the things that we begin to then accept. And the most classic example of this, of course, is Star Trek, and you see all the stuff in Star Trek, and then all of a sudden we have flip phones. But I know that a lot of people here in some way or another are involved in the media. And I think that at some point sort of the sort of wunderkind story became the big story. And I think that the more that we can represent entrepreneurs on the covers of magazines, the more it's not as an exciting story, right? I worked really hard, I took my lumps, I learned my lessons. It's not like, hey, I was 24, I came up with this thing in my, in my room and it took off. But I think that not just in magazines, but in movies, there was a study done by USC that essentially said, and it was done on media, and it essentially said that people who see positive images of aging in the media are actually more likely to age well. And so I think that we need to bring that into the entrepreneur space and just make sure that we're celebrating entrepreneurs of all types of diversity, and I think that will help.
Richard, I think you were about to jump.
Comment on that. I've been the youngest person at a startup and the oldest at a startup. I've seen ageism on both ends. But what I would say is the best way to conquer that is go create a company. Ignore how old you are, create a company. In order for media to show older entrepreneurs, there have to be older entrepreneurs. So, I've done it, you can do it, anyone can do it.
Go ahead, of course.
It does take a special kind of crazy.
I think we have a two at the
Yeah,
top
and-
right now. Go ahead, Nigel.
AARP, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's on now.
You may want to address the AARP plus.
All right, so also not going to specifically address mandatory retirement, but I'll just make two quick comments. So one, from my understanding, attitudes are beginning to turn, especially like in Silicon Valley, greater appreciation for what older tech entrepreneurs are bringing to the table. And again, when I think about what AARP and what we're doing, I think you're going to start seeing more and more, as we start seeing more and more successful older entrepreneurs, I think in society there will be that shift, right? It's going to take some time, and it's probably not happening as fast as we would like, but hopefully that shift happens as faster than it's happening right now. The second thing, and kind of goes back to the slide that I presented, the challenges are ridiculous, right? Again, there's this $7.6 trillion longevity economy opportunity, and there are all the health, self, and wealth challenges that are out there where there are desperate needs for solutions. So to echo what Rick was saying, we need desperately entrepreneurs to come out and build solutions. And if you have a solution that addresses these issues or these opportunities, you will find a market. So I think the onus is really on entrepreneurs, whether you're old or young, to just go out there, take that leap of faith, and just make it happen.
Minda, Melissa, last thought and takeaway message. Thanks.
Yeah, I definitely want to address this point because, unfortunately, ageism is the last acceptable form of discrimination that exists in the workplace. And what's crazy about that is 40 plus in the United States is a protected class. 40 plus. 40 is not old, I can tell you that. And so I think this is a huge challenge for us. And I think part of the issue is, yes, we recognize that for that individual, there is ageism there, and that's bad results for that individual. But it's also bad results for that company that's employing them. There's a recent study that shows that a third of people have reported that they've been passed up for a job, and they believe that was because of their age, starting at the age of 40. That is a big problem, and I think one of the issues around that is that the employer themselves needs to recognize that when ageism happens in the workplace, other people see it and they question, what is my employer doing? That decreases the morale, that decreases the productivity, and that decreases their ability to work well together. And so then they do have that situation where go out and start your own thing. And I think really that's what we should be looking at. There are opportunities, and people shouldn't feel like they don't have those opportunities. And we need to be the ones who are really pushing that perspective.
In terms of pushing that perspective, I have in our community slide retirees, retired professionals, retired experts. Those are the folks that will have the wisdom to help startup companies like mine move forward. I think that if we just make this a message that the retired are the folks to mine for their wonderful knowledge, expertise, experience, this will change. And our company, Vitality Health, is actively working on dealing with that issue. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Minta. Well, we had a wonderful discussion, I guess, right? Amin will also help me to wrap up, but it's a lot to wrap up. So maybe one key message. We have all opportunities, right? In this subject, it's extremely relevant. We have all challenges, but also accountabilities behind, and we have to make sure that we advocate for this extremely important subject and treat technology as an enabler, right? Amin?
Yes, thank you. I will just that's by saying that older persons offer like a valuable source of talent, and they should not be excluded. And it's from what I see here that we learned that we should change our mindsets, and keep them active and healthy, because that's very important for our societies. And our mission should be to advance people quality life as we age, as they age. And that's very important. And thank you so much for joining us today with ITU, AARP, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.